The Jawless fish were once some of the most successful builds in the game. Before the release of the Devonian update, all fish were jawless, and some of these builds, like the Conodonts, even managed to survive a few of the worst balance patches in the history of evolution life. Yet today, only 2 jawless fish remain. In this video, we will take a look at one of them, the hagfish, and analyze its strengths and weaknesses, to determine whether the jawless fish build is still great even to this day, or inevitably doomed to fail. Stay tuned for part 2, which should hopefully release shortly after part 1. First, let's take a look at their base stats. The primary stat which hagfish spent XP leveling up is their defense. More on that after we talk about their damage. Hagfish have a relatively weak damage stat. While they don't possess a jaw, they do have some teeth-like structures inside their mouth, arranged in rows. These teeth are used to grab onto food which they rip off of carcasses. Yes, hagfish are primarily scavengers who rely on carrion for the majority of their XP needs. Anyways, while these structures do achieve their intended purpose, they don't really help in combat. Luckily, hagfish have evolved some powerful adaptations to compensate for their weaknesses. More on that later. Hagfish do not have bones, instead opting for cartilage. This makes their base defense stat rather low. They have a skull, yet lack a vertebral column, which makes them really confusing for the rest of the evolution life community to classify. Hagfish didn't choose to go with any conventional defenses, however, as you can clearly see, these players do have a rather high defense stat, which raises the question, how? More on that later. Hagfish can grow to between 40 and 100 centimeters long and have a paddle-shaped tail, which means that there really isn't anything spectacular in terms of life or mobility either. Besides, hagfish have no reason to max out speed, since even at times when they do eat live prey, it usually isn't all too speedy. So does this mean hagfish are Y tier? Yes. Just kidding. There's a few huge things we haven't discussed yet, and one of these is their slime. Hagfish are capable of secreting enormous amounts of slime. Their slime is made up of protein and mucus, and expands rapidly when secreted, so much so that a few milliliters of slime can expand to fill an entire bucket. Hagfish players secrete slime whenever they feel threatened, which leads to the common situation of attackers having their gills and mouth clogged by the substance because they made a silly mistake of attacking a hagfish. This defensive technique is so effective against predatory fish since the gills can be so easily blocked by the rapidly expanding slime, which means that even high tiers such as sharks don't have any reliable means of taking down these players. The only builds which this defense doesn't work against are mammals, which didn't evolve gills and thus aren't so easily defeated by hagfish slime. Quick note before we get onto our next point, hagfish can tie themselves into knots, which helps them remove excess slime still stuck on their bodies and prevents them from being suffocated by their own weapon. However, hagfish only start secreting the massive amounts of gill-blocking slime after being attacked, so some players may wonder how the hagfish even survives long enough to use its defensive weapon, given the hagfish's lack of any bones, scales or armor which could help it tank an attack from a build like a shark. Also, no, their skin isn't secretly resistant to puncture-type damage. Instead, hagfish opted for extremely loose skin which is barely even attached to their bodies. Even when the skin is pierced, the hagfish can often just wriggle its way out, which while seemingly unreliable on first glance, is actually highly effective given how hagfish remains are rarely found inside the stomachs of other builds. Their loose skin also helps them fit into tight spaces, which is helpful offensively and defensively. By the way, since hagfish like feeding on carrion, they often burrow deep in order to acquire the most XP, and this is where hagfish make use of their interesting ability to absorb XP through skin, as well as through intestines. As to why this build opted for such an unconventional method of leveling up, I have no idea, especially since absorbing XP through skin is supposed to be less advanced than absorbing XP through intestines. Then again, given how long hagfish have remained unchanged, maybe I shouldn't question it, since if it wasn't at least decently helpful, hagfish would either be different or extinct. Anyways, in conclusion, I would say that hagfish are certainly not low tier. Unlike the velvet worm we discussed last time, hagfish are not just outdated garbage waiting to be banned. They have some powerful special abilities that allows them to remain relatively viable in their biomes, and while not a dominant build which threatens the existence of others so much they must adapt or perish, hagfish are still mid-tiers, since at the end of the day, you don't have to dominate everyone to be viable, you just need to ensure your continued survival, and given how long hagfish have remained playable, and the unique and useful traits which they have developed, I think it's safe to say that as much as some players wish for it to be removed, the hagfish will likely be a build that won't be going away anytime soon. Comment down below what you would like to see on the channel next, hit that like button with a jawless fish other than a hagfish and subscribe to my channel. Share this video with all your hagfish friends on social media. Stay tuned for part 2 of this video. Thanks for watching, and just to let you know, hagfish are used to make food for humans in some parts of the world, which isn't really surprising given all the other stuff humans eat.